The day I discovered my grandmother's jewelry was gone, something inside me shattered. Not just the obvious pain of losing precious family heirlooms, but the realization that the man I'd trusted with my life had betrayed me in the most callous way possible. Standing in front of my empty jewelry box, my hands trembling as they traced the velvet lining where my grandmother's emerald necklace should have been, I felt as though I'd been punched in the gut. I remember the day my grandmother gave me those pieces like it was yesterday. She'd called me to her bedroom just weeks before she passed away, her arthritis-twisted hands carefully opening the antique wooden box that had been in our family for generations. "These aren't just jewelry, Grace," she'd said, her voice weak but determined. "They're our family's history, our struggles, our triumphs. Each piece tells a story of the strong women who came before you." The emerald necklace had been given to my great-grandmother by her mother, who'd sold nearly everything she owned to buy it during the Great Depression, believing that having something beautiful to wear would help her daughter maintain dignity during those difficult times. The pearl earrings had been my grandmother's wedding gift from her father, who'd worked double shifts at the factory for a year to afford them. Each piece held not just monetary value, but the weight of my family's sacrifices and love. And now, they were gone. Sold by my husband, Ronald, without so much as a conversation. When I confronted him that evening, his response made my blood run cold. "I needed to help my family," he said casually, as if he was discussing the weather. "My brother's business is struggling, and he needed capital." When I expressed my shock and anger, his face transformed into something I'd never seen before, a mask of contempt and superiority that made me take a step back. "You're here for this," he spat. "What's yours is mine. That's what marriage is." In that moment, standing in our kitchen with the afternoon sun streaming through the windows, I saw Ronald clearly for the first time in our 15 years of marriage. I saw the subtle manipulation that had gradually isolated me from my friends and family. I saw the way he'd slowly taken control of our finances, convincing me it was for our shared future. I saw the small comments and criticisms that had chipped away at my confidence over the years. The jewelry wasn't just jewelry. It was the last thread connecting me to my own identity, my family's legacy. And he had severed it without a second thought. That night, as Ronald slept soundly beside me as if nothing had happened, I lay awake, my mind racing. I thought about my grandmother's words from years ago. "Remember, Grace, you come from a line of women who never backed down when life got hard." I thought about my great-grandmother wearing that emerald necklace with pride during the Depression, refusing to let circumstances break her spirit. By morning, I had made my decision. I waited until Ronald left for work, kissing me goodbye as if everything was normal. Then I started packing. Not everything, just what I needed. Clothes, important documents, and the few precious photos I had left of my family. I withdrew the money I'd been secretly saving from my part-time job at the library, an amount Ronald didn't know about because he'd never bothered to ask about my little hobby, as he called it. As I placed my house key on the kitchen counter, I noticed the magnet on our refrigerator, a souvenir from our honeymoon in Hawaii, bearing the words, "Paradise Found." The irony wasn't lost on me. I took out a piece of paper and wrote 4 simple words: "Help yourself to paradise." Just as I was about to walk out the door, my phone buzzed. A text from Ronald. "Don't forget to pick up my dry cleaning today, and make that pasta I like for dinner." I placed the phone next to the key, powered it off, and walked out the door without looking back. My hands were shaking, but my steps were sure. I had no idea where I was going, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was heading in the right direction. What I didn't know then was that this was just the beginning. The real test of my strength was yet to come, and it would challenge everything I thought I knew about myself, about love, and about survival. The first night of freedom felt anything but free. I sat in a modest motel room on the outskirts of town, watching headlights sweep across the ceiling as cars passed by on the highway. Each time I heard footsteps in the corridor outside, my heart would race, imagining Ronald had somehow found me. The room smelled of old cigarettes and cheap air freshener, but it was better than breathing in the suffocating air of lies back home. My phone lay dead in my purse, and I could almost see it filling up with messages and missed calls. Part of me wanted to turn it on, to know what Ronald was saying, how he was reacting. But I knew better. 15 years of marriage had taught me that his first response would be charm, sweet messages of concern and love. Then would come the guilt trips, the accusations, and finally, the threats. I'd seen this pattern play out with smaller conflicts. I couldn't imagine his reaction to finding our house empty. As I lay there in the darkness, my mind wandered to Monica, my best friend from college whom I hadn't spoken to in years. Ronald had never liked her, claiming she was a bad influence because she questioned his controlling behavior. Gradually, like so many other friendships, we'd lost touch. Now, I wished I had maintained those connections, kept some lifeline to the outside world. The next morning, I forced myself to face reality. I had approximately $3,200 in savings, enough for maybe 2 months if I was extremely careful. My library job paid barely above minimum wage. I'd have to find something better, fast. As I sat at the small desk in my motel room, making lists and calculations, I realized how thoroughly Ronald had orchestrated my dependence on him. My credit cards were all joint accounts, which I couldn't risk using now. My car was in his name. Even my cell phone was on his family plan. I spent that first day taking small steps toward independence. At a local bank, I opened a new account in my name only. At a mobile phone store, I got a basic phone with a new number. Each action felt both terrifying and exhilarating, like learning to walk again after being wheelchair-bound for years. The woman at the Domestic Violence Support Center, yes, I finally admitted to myself that's what this was, helped me understand I wasn't alone. Financial abuse is still abuse, she said gently as I sobbed through my story. Selling your inheritance without permission, controlling your access to money, isolating you from support systems. These are all forms of domestic violence. Her words hit me like waves, each one washing away another layer of self-doubt. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went to a coffee shop alone. Just sat there, watching people come and go, nursing a single cup of coffee for hours because I needed to save money. An elderly couple at the next table caught my attention. The woman was telling her husband about a book she'd just finished, and he was listening with such genuine interest, asking questions, engaging with her thoughts. I couldn't remember the last time Ronald had shown interest in anything I had to say. As I was leaving the coffee shop, my new phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but when I answered, I heard a voice I hadn't heard in over a decade. "Grace? It's Monica. Your sister found me on Facebook and told me what happened. I've been trying to reach you all day." I stood frozen on the sidewalk, clutching my phone like a lifeline. Monica's voice brought back memories of who I used to be, the confident college girl who had dreams and opinions of her own. "I don't know what to do," I whispered, fighting back tears. "Yes, you do," Monica replied firmly. "You already did it. You left. Now you just need to keep going. Listen, I live 3 hours away. I have a spare room. It's yours if you want it." The offer hung in the air like a rope thrown to a drowning person, but something held me back from grabbing it immediately. I need to think about it," I said finally. "I need to figure out if I can stand on my own first." Monica understood. She always did. "The offer stands," she said. "But Grace, whatever you decide, don't go back. I watched you disappear once. I can't watch it happen again." That night, back in my motel room, I received a text from an unknown number. Somehow, Ronald had already gotten my new number. "I know you're scared and confused," it read. "Come home. We can work this out. I'll buy you new jewelry, better jewelry. Just come home." My hands shook as I read his message. The old Grace might have been tempted, might have talked herself into believing him. But sitting there in that cramped motel room, I felt something new taking root inside me, something that felt like strength. I deleted his message without responding. Then I took out my notebook and began to write. "Dear Ronald, I'm not lost or confused. For the first time in years, I'm finding myself—" I stopped, crumpled the paper, and threw it away. He didn't deserve an explanation. More importantly, I didn't owe him one. Instead, I opened my laptop and began searching for apartment listings in the city. They were all far more expensive than I'd hoped, and my heart sank as I scrolled through page after page. But then I spotted something interesting. A local women's business association was offering a 6-week intensive course in real estate licensing, with financial aid available for women in transition. As I clicked on the link to learn more, I heard my grandmother's voice in my head. Sometimes, Grace, losing everything is just life's way of making room for something better. I had no idea if I could make it as a real estate agent, but for the first time in years, I was excited about finding out. I completed the online application just as thunder rolled outside my window, and rain began to pelt against the glass. A storm was coming, both literally and figuratively, but this time, I was ready to weather it. The real estate licensing course turned out to be both my sanctuary and my battlefield. I found a tiny studio apartment I could barely afford and threw myself into studying. Every morning, I'd wake up at 5 a.m., review my notes over instant coffee, then head to my morning shift at the library before attending afternoon classes. The schedule was grueling, but it kept me too busy to dwell on the hollow ache in my chest. Carol, our lead instructor, became my unexpected mentor. A woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing, she caught me one day after class. "Your test scores are excellent," she said, "but you look like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders." Something in her direct gaze broke through my carefully constructed walls. Before I knew it, I was sitting in her office telling her everything. About the jewelry, about Ronald, about the years of subtle manipulation that had led to that final betrayal. She listened without interruption, only the tightening of her jaw showing her reaction. "You know," she said when I finished, "I see a lot of women like you in these courses. Women starting over. The ones who succeed aren't always the smartest or the most experienced. They're the ones who are hungry for change, who have something to prove, mostly to themselves." She paused, studying me. "You have that hunger. I can see it. But life had other plans for testing my resolve. One evening, as I was leaving the library, I found Ronald waiting by my car. My heart nearly stopped. He looked different, thinner, unshaven, his usual polished appearance slightly frayed at the edges. "Grace," he said softly, using that gentle voice that had once made me feel so safe. "You have to come home. This has gone on long enough." He took a step toward me, and I instinctively backed away. I sold the jewelry to help my brother, yes, but I did it for us, for our future. His business will make us rich. I was going to surprise you with something even better. I felt a hysterical laugh bubble up in my throat. Something better? Those pieces weren't about their monetary value, Ronald. They were about my family's history, about the women who came before me. But you never understood that, did you? Just like you never understood me. His face darkened. I understood that you were becoming too independent. This job, these classes you're taking, they're changing you. The old Grace would never have abandoned her marriage like this. The old Grace was afraid. I shot back, my voice stronger than I felt. The old Grace thought love meant giving up pieces of herself until there was nothing left. He moved closer, and I saw a dangerous glint in his eyes that I recognized from our worst arguments. "You have no right to throw away 15 years of marriage. What will people think? Your sister called me yesterday, worried sick about you. Even she thinks you're being unreasonable." My sister. Of course he'd gotten to her. Betsy had always been easily swayed by Ronald's charm, always telling me how lucky I was to have such a devoted husband. The thought of her taking his side sent a fresh wave of pain through me. "I don't care what people think anymore," I said, though part of me did care, desperately. "And I don't care what you think either. Leave me alone, Ronald. It's over." I tried to walk past him to my car, but he grabbed my arm. Not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to remind me of his strength. "You're making a mistake," he hissed. "You're nothing without me. Who's going to want a middle-aged woman with no real career, no money, no family support?" For a moment, I froze, his words hitting every insecurity I'd been battling. Then I heard Carol's voice in my head. "The ones who succeed are the ones who have something to prove." I jerked my arm free. "I want her," I said clearly. "I want that woman you're describing. She's brave enough to start over with nothing rather than live with everything in a gilded cage. Now move away from my car or I'm calling the police." He stepped back, surprised by my firmness. "This isn't over," he said, but his voice had lost its certainty. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the confrontation in my mind, wondering if I should have handled it differently. Around midnight, my phone lit up with a text from Betsy. "Ronald told me everything. How could you be so selfish? Mom and Dad would be so disappointed in you." The words felt like physical blows. I turned off my phone and curled up in my bed, trying to fight back tears. But as I lay there in the darkness, I realized something. The pain was different now. Before, it had been the pain of being trapped, of slowly suffocating. Now it was the pain of growth, of muscles stretching and strengthening. The next morning, I arrived early to class, my eyes still puffy from crying. Carol took one look at me and pulled me aside. "Rough night?" I nodded, then squared my shoulders. "But I'm ready to work." She smiled. "Good, because today we're starting contract law, and it's going to make everything else look like child's play." As I took my seat, I noticed a new student 2 rows ahead, a woman about my age who looked as tired as I felt. During our break, she introduced herself as Diane. "I left my husband 6 months ago," she said without preamble. "He gambled away our savings. Found out he'd mortgaged our house without telling me." We looked at each other, recognizing the same battle scars. "Want to grab coffee after class?" I asked. "I know a place." She nodded, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something like hope. Not the desperate kind that had kept me with Ronald for so long, but something steadier, more substantial. Like the first shoots of green breaking through hard winter soil. What I didn't know then was that this was just the beginning of a network that would prove more valuable than any jewelry could ever be. But I also didn't know that Ronald was far from finished trying to reclaim what he saw as his property. Me. Coffee with Diane became our daily ritual. We'd meet at a small cafe between classes, sharing stories and strategies for survival. She told me about the gambling addiction that had destroyed her marriage, how her husband had hidden his losses until creditors started calling. I shared about the jewelry, the isolation, the slow erosion of my identity. Other women from our class started joining us. Maria, whose husband had cheated with her best friend. Rebecca, escaping an emotionally abusive relationship. Jenny, rebuilding her life after divorce. We called ourselves the Phoenix Club, half joking about rising from the ashes of our past lives. But there was truth in the humor. Each of us was transforming, shedding old fears and limitations like worn-out skins. One morning, about 2 months into the course, I arrived at the cafe to find Diane unusually quiet. "My ex found out where I live," she finally said, stirring her untouched coffee. "He showed up last night, drunk, demanding to talk. Said he's changed, he's in therapy, he's stopped gambling." Her hands trembled slightly. Part of me wanted to believe him. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "What did you do?" "I called the police," she said, a mix of pride and pain in her voice. "First time I've ever done that. They took him away, but..." She looked up at me. "Is it strange that I still feel guilty?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Your sister told me about your real estate classes. Always knew you were sleeping with that instructor. Why else would she help you? Ronald deserves better." My stomach churned as I realized it was from Ronald's mother, Ellen. She'd always treated me with thinly veiled contempt, convinced I wasn't good enough for her precious son. Now she was spreading vicious rumors about Carol, trying to destroy the one person who'd given me a chance. "Your hands are shaking," Diane observed. I showed her the text. She read it, then looked at me with fierce determination. "You know what? We're not doing this alone anymore. Time to fight fire with fire." That afternoon, instead of our usual study group, Diane arranged for a lawyer friend to meet with our Phoenix Club. Lisa, specializing in family law, arrived with a stack of papers and a no-nonsense attitude that immediately put me at ease. "First thing," she said, spreading documents across the cafe table, "we're getting restraining orders for both of you. Second, we're documenting everything. Every text, every call, every attempt at contact. Third," she smiled grimly, "we're going to teach you about your rights." For the next 2 hours, Lisa walked us through the legal maze of protection orders, divorce proceedings, and property rights. She explained how financial abuse was grounds for legal action, how Ronald selling my inherited jewelry without consent could be considered theft. But the jewelry's gone, I protested. What's the point? The point, Lisa said firmly, is establishing a pattern of abuse. Also, there might be ways to trace where the pieces were sold. If we can prove he sold them without your consent, we can seek compensation. As she spoke, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. For the first time, I wasn't just running away. I was fighting back. That evening, as I walked to my car, I spotted a familiar figure in the parking lot. Ellen. She marched toward me, designer handbag swinging like a weapon. "You ungrateful little witch," she spat. "Do you know what you're doing to my son? To our family's reputation?" I thought of the strong women I'd met, of Lisa's legal advice, of my Phoenix Club sisters. Something shifted inside me. "Your family's reputation?" I said quietly. "What about my family's legacy that Ronald sold without a second thought? What about the years I spent trying to please you while you treated me like I was beneath you?" "You were beneath us," she sneered. "A nobody from nowhere, lucky to marry into our family. And this is how you repay us? By spreading lies about abuse?" "They're not lies," I said, my voice steady. "And I'm not nobody. I never was." She reached for my arm, but I stepped back. "Don't touch me," I warned. "I have witnesses, and I'm not afraid to call the police." Ellen's face contorted with rage, but she looked around, noticing the other students watching from the classroom windows. With a final venomous glare, she stormed off. Back in my apartment, I received a call from Betsy. "Mom just called me crying," she said. "She said you threatened Ellen? Grace, what's happening to you?" "What's happening is that I'm finally standing up for myself," I replied. "Betsy, I love you, but if you can't support me in this, I need you to stay out of it." There was a long pause. "I just want my sister back," she whispered. "I am back," I said softly. "The real me. The one who disappeared so gradually, we both forgot she existed." After hanging up, I sat at my small desk, surrounded by real estate textbooks and legal documents. My phone buzzed with messages from the Phoenix Club. Words of support, offers to stay with them if I felt unsafe, reminders of our strength together. I opened my study materials, focusing on the complex language of contract law. In 2 weeks, we'd have our first major exam. Carol had warned us it would be challenging, but I felt ready. More than ready. I felt empowered. What I didn't realize was that Ellen's appearance was just the beginning. Ronald had always used his mother to fight his battles, and now that she'd failed, he would try a different approach. One that would test not just my resolve, but the bonds of my newfound sisterhood in ways I never expected. The morning of our first major exam, I woke to a series of increasingly frantic texts from Diane. "Grace, check your email, now." My hands trembled as I opened my inbox to find a message from the Real Estate Licensing Board, copied to every student in our class. Someone had filed an ethics complaint against Carol, alleging she was accepting sexual favors in exchange for passing grades. The evidence? A series of doctored photos showing Carol and me in what appeared to be intimate situations outside of class. My stomach lurched as I recognized the background: the cafe where we'd had our counseling sessions, the parking lot where she'd hugged me after I broke down about Ronald. Innocent moments twisted into something sordid. I knew immediately who was behind it. Ronald had always been skilled at manipulation, at taking fragments of truth and reshaping them into weapons. He'd done it throughout our marriage, subtly turning friends against me by planting seeds of doubt about my loyalty, my stability, my intentions. "We're all behind you," Diane's next text read, followed by a flood of supportive messages from our Phoenix Club members. But when I arrived at the training center, I could feel the stares, hear the whispers. Some students moved away when I sat down, as if my supposed scandal might be contagious. Carol wasn't there. An administrator announced she'd been temporarily suspended pending investigation. Our exam would be postponed. As I listened to the murmurs of speculation around me, shame and anger warred in my chest. This wasn't just an attack on me, it was an attempt to destroy Carol's career, to punish her for helping women like me find their independence. During our lunch break, I found myself surrounded by the Phoenix Club in our usual cafe. "We need to fight back," Maria declared, her dark eyes flashing with anger. "We all know Carol. We've all seen how she's helped us. This is nothing but a smear campaign." Lisa, our lawyer friend, was already on her phone, firing off emails. "We can prove these photos are doctored," she said, "and we can trace who submitted them. If it was Ronald or someone acting on his behalf, that's harassment and defamation." Rebecca, who'd been quietly typing on her laptop, looked up. "I think I found something. The metadata on these photos. They've definitely been manipulated. And look at the email address they were sent from. It's a variation of Ronald's company domain." I felt a cold clarity settle over me. He's not just trying to hurt me anymore. He's willing to destroy anyone who helps me. I stood up, my decision made. "I need to make a statement to the licensing board. Tell them everything." "Are you sure?" Jenny asked gently. "Going public with your story is exactly what Ronald doesn't expect," I finished. "He thinks I'm still that woman who'll do anything to avoid conflict, to keep the peace. But I'm not her anymore." That afternoon, I sat before the licensing board. 3 stern-faced individuals who'd assembled for an emergency hearing. My Phoenix Club sisters filled the back row, their presence giving me strength. "The allegations against Carol Matthews are false," I began, my voice steady. "They're part of a pattern of harassment from my estranged husband, who sold my family heirlooms without permission and has been trying to sabotage my attempts at independence ever since." I laid out everything: the financial abuse, the isolation, the manipulation. I showed them the threatening texts, the documentation Lisa had helped me compile. "Ms. Matthews has been nothing but professional," I continued. "She's helped countless women rebuild their lives through this program. The only thing she's guilty of is showing compassion to students in crisis." The board members exchanged looks. The chair, a woman with steel-rimmed glasses, leaned forward. "These are serious allegations, Mrs. Taylor. Do you have any evidence that your husband was behind these photos?" Rebecca raised her hand from the back of the room. "I do," she said, walking forward with her laptop. "I'm a former IT security specialist. I can show you exactly how these images were manipulated and trace them back to their source." As Rebecca presented her technical evidence, I felt my phone vibrate. A text from Betsy. "Just had a long talk with Mom. She told me things about your marriage I never knew. Things Ronald said and did. I'm so sorry I didn't see it sooner. I'm on my way to you." Tears blurred my vision, but I blinked them back. This wasn't the time for emotional reunions. The board was reaching their decision. "In light of this evidence," the chair announced, "we're dismissing the complaint against Ms. Matthews. Furthermore, we'll be referring this case of harassment to our legal department." She looked directly at me. "Mrs. Taylor, would you be willing to provide a formal statement about these events?" "Yes," I said firmly. I'm done being silent. As we left the hearing room, Carol was waiting outside. She hugged me tightly, whispering, "I never doubted you." Then she stepped back, straightening her jacket with her usual professional demeanor. "Now, I believe we have an exam to prepare for." That evening, as I studied with renewed determination, I received another text, this time from Ronald. "You think you've won? This isn't over. I made you who you are. Without me, you're nothing." I showed the message to Diane, who'd stayed to study with me. She read it and smiled grimly. "He's wrong, you know. He didn't make you who you are. He just convinced you to forget who you were. And now?" She gestured at our textbooks, our notes, our dreams spreading out before us. "Now you're remembering." I saved the text as evidence and turned back to my studies. Ronald was right about one thing. This wasn't over. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what came next. I had truth on my side, and an army of sisters standing with me. What I didn't know was that Ronald had one more card to play, one that would force me to choose between my newfound strength and something I thought I'd lost forever. The day I passed my real estate licensing exam should have been purely triumphant. My score was among the highest in the class, and the Phoenix Club had planned a celebration at our usual cafe. But when I arrived, I found Diane waiting alone, her face grave. "Ronald contacted me," she said without preamble. "He has your grandmother's jewelry." The world tilted sideways. I gripped the edge of the table, my coffee forgotten. That's impossible. He sold it. Apparently not all of it. Diane pulled out her phone, showing me a photo Ronald had sent her. There, nestled in familiar velvet, lay my grandmother's pearl earrings, the ones she'd worn on her wedding day, the ones she'd promised would be my something old at my own wedding. He says he'll return them, Diane continued carefully, if you meet with him. Alone. My hands shook as I stared at the photo. Those pearls were more than jewelry. They were the last tangible connection to my grandmother, to the legacy of strong women she'd wanted me to continue. For a moment, I was transported back to her bedroom, hearing her voice. These pearls saw me through the hardest times, Grace. They reminded me that beauty can survive darkness. When? My voice sounded distant to my own ears. Tonight. At your old house. Of course. The house we'd shared for 15 years, the place where I'd slowly lost myself. Ronald always did have a flair for psychological warfare. You're not actually considering this? Diane's voice sharpened with concern. Grace, it's a trap. He's desperate. The licensing board investigation is closing in on him. Betsy's stopped speaking to him. His mother's social circle is buzzing with rumors about his behavior. He's losing control. Which makes him more dangerous than ever, I acknowledged. But those pearls are not worth your safety. Carol's voice cut in. She'd arrived without us noticing, and now she pulled up a chair, her expression fierce with concern. Think about what you're considering. Going alone to meet an abuser who's just lost his last shreds of public respectability? They were right, of course. The rational part of my brain screamed that this was exactly the kind of manipulation that had kept me trapped for so long. But my heart ached for those pearls, for what they represented. I pulled out my phone and called Lisa. After explaining the situation, I asked, Legally, what are my options? The pearls are your inherited property, she said. If we can prove he withheld them deliberately while claiming he'd sold them, that's theft. We could file charges, get a court order. How long would that take? Her hesitation told me everything. Weeks, minimum. And we'd have to prove they were actually in his possession. That photo isn't enough evidence. As I hung up, my phone buzzed with a text from Ronald. 1 hour, come alone or the pearls disappear forever. Your choice. I looked at the concerned faces around me. These women who'd become my family of choice, who'd helped me rebuild my life from the ashes of my marriage. Then I thought of my grandmother, of her strength, of the legacy these pearls represented. I'm going, I said quietly. But not alone, and not his way. Over the next 45 minutes, we formulated a plan. Carol called in a favor from her brother, a private investigator. Diane contacted her friend at the local police station. Rebecca set up a live stream connection through my phone that would feed directly to her laptop. Maria and Jenny positioned themselves strategically around the neighborhood. As I parked in front of my old house, my heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. Through my earpiece, I could hear Rebecca's voice. We've got eyes on you. Police are 2 minutes away if needed. You're not alone. The porch light flickered on as I approached. Ronald opened the door before I could knock, and for a moment I was struck by how small he seemed. The man who had once filled my entire world now looked diminished, desperate. You came, he said, trying for his old, controlling smile. I knew you would. You always do the right thing, Grace. That's what I love about you. Where are the pearls, Ronald? He stepped back, gesturing for me to enter. Let's talk inside, like civilized people. No, I stayed where I was. Either show me the pearls now, or I walk away. His face darkened. You don't give the orders here. You never did. Actually, I said calmly, I do. Right now, you're being watched by multiple witnesses. The police are on standby, and everything you say is being recorded. So I'll ask one more time. Where are my grandmother's pearls? He laughed, but I heard the edge of hysteria in it. You think I'm scared of the police? Of your little band of bitter divorcees? I made you, Grace. Everything you are is because of me. No, I corrected him. Everything I am is despite you. The pearls, Ronald. Now. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the velvet box. For a moment, I glimpsed my grandmother's pearls glowing softly in the porch light. Then, with a sudden movement, he snapped the box shut and held it over the porch railing. above the concrete steps below. "Choose," he said. "Come inside and talk, or watch your precious legacy shatter." Time seemed to slow down. I saw the box balanced on his palm, saw the familiar way his jaw clenched when he thought he had the upper hand, and in that moment, I finally understood something my grandmother had tried to tell me long ago. "The legacy isn't in the pearls, Ronald," I said softly. "It's in me. It always was." His eyes widened in genuine shock. Before he could react, I turned and walked away, my steps firm and measured. Behind me, I heard the clatter of the box hitting the steps, heard him swear, heard the sound of running feet. Not his, but the police officers who'd been waiting. Later, they would tell me the pearls were fake, cheap replicas he'd bought to lure me back. The real ones had been sold months ago, just as he'd originally claimed. But somehow, that knowledge didn't hurt as much as I'd expected. That night, surrounded by my Phoenix Club sisters, I finally cried. Not for the lost pearls, but for the years I'd spent believing that my worth could be contained in a velvet box, controlled by someone else's hands. "You know what this means?" Diane asked, passing me a tissue. "What?" "You're finally free. Really free." She was right. By choosing myself over the pearls, I'd broken the last chain binding me to my past. But as I would soon discover, freedom comes with its own challenges. And Ronald had one final surprise that would test not just my resolve, but everything I thought I knew about forgiveness and redemption. A week after the confrontation on the porch, I sat in Carol's office, staring at a job offer from one of the city's most prestigious real estate firms. My test scores and the publicity from the licensing board incident had caught their attention. They wanted me to join their team, specializing in helping women in transition find new homes, literally and figuratively. "It's a good offer," Carol said, watching me carefully. "But you seem hesitant." I traced the embossed logo on the letterhead. "Ronald always told me I wasn't cut out for high-pressure jobs, that I was too emotional, too sensitive." I laughed softly. Even now, his voice is in my head, telling me I'll fail. "And what does your voice say?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. A text from Betsy. "At the hospital with Mom. She had a fall. She's asking for you." My mother-in-law, the woman who'd treated me with contempt for 15 years, wanted to see me. Part of me wanted to ignore the message, to let her taste the bitterness of rejection she'd so often served me. But something in Betsy's next message gave me pause. "She's been crying, Grace. Says she needs to tell you something about Ronald." I looked up at Carol. "I need to go to the hospital." She nodded, understanding in her eyes. Sometimes healing means facing every ghost, not just the obvious ones. At the hospital, I found Ellen in a private room, her designer clothes replaced by a hospital gown that made her look surprisingly vulnerable. Betsy hugged me tightly, whispering, "Thank you for coming," before stepping out to give us privacy. "I didn't think you'd come," Ellen said, her voice lacking its usual sharp edge. "Neither did I admitted, sitting in the chair beside her bed. She was quiet for a long moment, fiddling with her blanket. "I found something in Ronald's old room at our house," she finally said. "Letters from his father, written from prison. I never knew Robert wrote to him." I sat up straighter. Ronald had always told me his father died when he was young. It was one of the first things that had drawn me to him, our shared experience of loss, as my own parents had died in a car accident when I was in college. "Prison?" I repeated. Ellen's eyes filled with tears. "Robert. He was like Ronald, charming in public, but at home." She touched her arm unconsciously, and I recognized the gesture, the same way I used to check for bruises. "He went to prison for embezzlement when Ronald was 12. I told everyone he died because I was ashamed. I thought if I gave Ronald everything, loved him enough, he wouldn't become his father." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. So many things suddenly made sense. Ronald's obsession with appearances, his need for control, his complex relationship with money and power. "The letters," Ellen continued, "they're full of manipulation, of blame. Robert telling Ronald that everything was my fault, that women couldn't be trusted. I never knew Ronald was reading these, absorbing these ideas. I thought I was protecting him, but..." She looked at me directly for the first time. I helped create the man who hurt you, and I added to that hurt with my own behavior. I sat there processing this new information. Part of me wanted to tell her that understanding Ronald's pain didn't excuse his actions. But looking at Ellen, really looking at her, I saw another wounded woman who'd made choices out of fear and shame. We all did the best we could with what we knew at the time, I said finally. Even Ronald, maybe. But that doesn't mean we have to keep making the same choices. She reached for my hand, and for the first time in our relationship, I didn't feel the need to brace myself for criticism. I found something else, she said. A receipt from the jewelry store where Ronald sold your grandmother's pieces. I called them. Most items were already sold, but they still have the emerald necklace. They're willing to sell it back. My heart jumped, but I forced myself to stay calm. I can't afford it. I can, Ellen said. Let me do this. Not to erase what happened, but to show you I understand its importance now. As I left the hospital that evening, my mind was swirling. I called Diane, needing to process. We met at our cafe where I told her everything. So what are you going to do? She asked when I finished. About the necklace? I don't know. Part of me wants it back so badly, but accepting such an expensive gift from Ellen might feel like trading one obligation for another, Diane finished. I nodded. And about the job offer, I'm scared, Diane. Not just of failing, but of succeeding. Of building a life so completely different from anything Ronald thought I could have. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You know what I think. I think that's exactly why you should do both. Accept the necklace and take the job. Show yourself that you can navigate complex relationships without losing yourself. That you can accept help without giving up your power. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a message from the real estate firm. Looking forward to your decision. Our clients need someone who understands their journey. Looking at those words, I felt something settle inside me. I thought of all the women out there, packing their bags in the middle of the night, choosing themselves over safety and familiarity. They deserved someone who could show them not just houses, but possibilities. I'm taking the job, I said firmly. Diane grinned. Never doubted you would. What I didn't know then was that my first client would force me to confront the final piece of my own healing, and that Ronald's last surprise would test not just my newfound strength, but my capacity for forgiveness in ways I never expected. My first day at Preston and Vale Real Estate started with a surprise. The managing partner, Victoria Preston herself, was waiting in my new office. I have a special client for you, she said, placing a file on my desk. She's leaving a difficult situation. Needs someone who understands discretion. I opened the file and felt my breath catch. The client's name was Laura Davies, Ronald's younger sister. We'd never been close. She lived on the West Coast and visited rarely. The few times we'd met, she'd seemed withdrawn, especially around Ronald. She specifically requested you, Victoria added. Said she's been following your story. My hands trembled slightly as I read through Laura's requirements. A secure building, privacy gates, excellent security system. The sort of place someone chooses when they're looking over their shoulder. I called Laura that afternoon. Her voice was different from what I remembered, stronger, though with an edge of tension. I left Marcus, she said without preamble. After I heard about what Ronald did to you, it gave me courage, made me realize I wasn't alone. The revelation stunned me. I'd only met Marcus twice, at family gatherings where he'd seemed charming, attentive, just like Ronald had appeared to outsiders. Are you safe? I asked. For now. I'm staying at a hotel under a different name, but I need something permanent. Somewhere I can... She paused. Somewhere I can remember who I am. We arranged to meet the next morning. When Laura walked into our cafe, I'd chosen it deliberately. This place that had become a symbol of safety and solidarity. I almost didn't recognize her. Gone was the timid woman who'd always seemed to fade into the background. This Laura held herself differently. Despite the dark circles under her eyes and the careful way she scanned the room before sitting down. Ronald doesn't know I'm here, she said quickly. After everything that happened with you, he and Marcus had a falling out. Marcus said you were lying about the abuse, but Ronald defended you, said you were right to leave, that he'd been wrong. She twisted her hands together. It was the first crack in Marcus's perfect image. I started seeing patterns I'd been ignoring for years. I absorbed this information, feeling oddly detached from the mention of Ronald's apparent moment of self-awareness. "Tell me what you're looking for in a home," I said gently. "Not just the security features. What would make you feel like yourself again?" Laura's eyes filled with tears. "Windows," she whispered. "Lots of windows. Marcus always kept the curtains closed. Said it was for privacy, but really," she straightened her shoulders, "I want light. And a kitchen where I can cook again. He always said my cooking was terrible, but I used to love it. And maybe a small garden?" Over the next week, I showed Laura several properties, watching her gradually relax, start to imagine possibilities. The Phoenix Club rallied around her. Diane helped her set up a new bank account. Rebecca did a security audit of her online presence. Maria shared her own story of reclaiming joy through cooking. Then came the morning I arrived at the office to find Marcus waiting in the lobby. "Where is she?" he demanded, stepping into my path. Like Ronald, he was well-dressed, well-spoken, the picture of professional success. But I saw what I hadn't noticed years ago: the controlled rage in his eyes, the way he used his height to intimidate. "I don't discuss clients," I said firmly, grateful for the security guard watching nearby. "Please leave before I call the police." "She's my wife," he snarled. "You have no right to interfere." "What is it with you Taylor women? Think you can destroy families, spread lies?" "Step back, sir," the security guard warned, moving closer. Marcus straightened his tie, his mask of civility slipping back into place. "Tell Laura to call me. Tell her I forgive her for this temporary insanity. Tell her to come home before she loses everything." After he left, I called Laura immediately. She broke down when I told her about Marcus's visit. "He'll never stop," she sobbed. "Just like Ronald never stopped trying to control you?" "Ronald did stop," I said, surprising myself with the realization. "When I finally showed him I wasn't his to control anymore. And Marcus will stop too, because you're stronger than you know." That evening, I received an unexpected call from Ronald. For a moment, I considered not answering, but something made me pick up. "I just heard about Marcus coming to your office," he said. His voice sounded different, quieter, less certain. "I wanted to warn you to be careful. He's not stable." "Like you weren't stable?" I asked. A long pause. "I'm in therapy," he said finally. "Real therapy. Not just the anger management classes I used to mock. Laura deserves better than what Marcus is doing to her. You deserved better than what I did to you." I thought of Ellen in the hospital, of generational trauma passing like a poisoned inheritance. "Yes, we did," I agreed. "But you can help break the cycle. Tell the truth about Marcus if Laura needs witnesses. Show your nephew that there's another way to be a man." "I will," he said softly. "Grace, the emerald necklace. Mom told me she offered to buy it back. She did. Let her. Not for me, not even for her, but for Grandma Rose and everything she wanted for you." After we hung up, I sat in my office for a long time, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of healing. My phone buzzed with a message from Laura. She'd found a listing she wanted to see, a cottage with big windows and a garden space. Tomorrow, I would help my sister-in-law take another step toward freedom. Tomorrow, I would accept Ellen's offer to reclaim a piece of my heritage. Tomorrow, I would continue building a life I'd never imagined possible. But tonight, surrounded by the evidence of how far I'd come, I finally understood what my grandmother had tried to tell me about legacies. They're not in the things we inherit, but in the strength we pass on. Every woman who breaks free makes it easier for the next one to follow. What I didn't know was that Laura's journey would bring one final revelation, one that would change not just her life and mine, but the lives of countless women yet to find their courage. 1 year after I left my empty jewelry box behind, I stood in Laura's new garden, watching her tend to her blooming roses. The cottage she'd chosen had transformed from a neglected property into a sanctuary, much like its owner. Laura had filled every window with plants, painted the walls in sunny yellows and peaceful blues, and turned the small backyard into an oasis of flowers and herbs. I never thought I'd feel this peaceful again, she said, brushing dirt from her hands. Do you remember what you told me when you first showed me this place? I smiled, remembering that day. I said sometimes the most broken things become the most beautiful, once they're given room to grow. She nodded, touching a rose petal gently. Marcus finally signed the divorce papers yesterday. Ronald testified about the family history of abuse. His therapist says it was a breakthrough moment. The mention of Ronald no longer brought that clutch of anxiety in my chest. Time and distance had given me perspective I never thought possible. He was neither the monster of my fears nor the charming man of my early memories, just a damaged person finally facing his own demons. My emerald necklace caught the sunlight as I moved to help Laura with her pruning. Ellen had indeed bought it back, but with an unexpected twist. She'd had it reset, adding small diamonds that represented, she said, the strength that comes from breaking and rebuilding. I wore it now not as a reminder of what I'd lost, but of what I'd gained. Grace, Laura said hesitantly, I've been thinking about that